Corey Hawkins here, and today I'm deviating from my normal gardening content to have a conversation with my two favorite astrologers to answer the question, astrology, what's the friggin' point? So I know that most people know what their sun signs are, and most people have read their horoscope in, Cosmopolitan or in the newspaper, and my guess is that most people have gotten no value from that. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay. And there's still value in astrology, and I want to help you find that today. So joining me today, like I said, are my two favorite astrologers. I've got Jennifer Fox from Foxy Astrology. She's the Fox, so that's what I call her. And then I have Jennifer Hryciw from the Painted Goddess. So my two Astro-gens, but Jennifer Fox is the Fox. So let's start with you, the Fox. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history with astrology, and what brings you here today?
Sure. My grandmother was always interested in astrology and tarot reading. She would always get me like see, I have my Capricorn necklace. She would always buy me like a necklace with like my zodiac sign for like my birthday or for Christmas. She kind of really got me interested in it. And I used to read the newspaper and always look for the horoscope when I was a kid. But when I got to be around my 30s, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And a friend of mine bought me a reading from a very well-known astrologer in Seattle, where I lived at the time. I went to see her after I had my cancer surgery. She didn't know anything about me other than my information, birth information. And I sat at her kitchen table and drank a cup of coffee, and just my head was exploding. She knew so much about me. She knew I had just been through a major change in life, and that I had an opportunity to walk out the door, and I decided to stay. So I just sat there quiet, which is unusual for me, and listened to her for about an hour and was absolutely amazed. And from that time on, I started to have regular readings with her. And I kept saying to her every time I had a reading, I really want to do this. I really want to know more about astrology, because this is such an incredible tool. I'm learning so much about myself, which is really, I think, the basis of why you freaking want to know anything about astrology. It is a tool to understand the sacred geometry of your chart, why you came here, what you're here to accomplish, what the energy patterns are when you're facing a challenge. And we all experience cycles. And so I started seeing all these things, these cycles, and I started recognizing them. And then I was like, okay, so this is how I would normally approach the situation. But now I have all of this other information, at my disposal to really understand what is this energy helping me to find out about myself. And it's such a great tool for growth. I said to her, I really want to do this. And she was like, astrology is really complex. It's like, you have to really be dedicated. Well, little did she know that I have a Pluto conjunct my midheaven in Virgo exactly. And I'm determined. So it's like the minute you say I can't do something, I'm on it. I just started studying everything I could get my hands on. I became extremely obsessive about it. Then I started taking some courses online. I met some great astrologers and kind of befriended them and started picking their brain, and mentored with a couple of them, and continued. And then I decided, okay, I'm 40 something. I'm not 40 anymore, but I was at one time. And I decided I'm going to start putting my shingle out and doing readings for people. And I think that's I really started realizing how much I didn't know and how much I needed to really continue to learn. And so I've been doing astrology for almost 17 years now, as a person who really is looking at it on a daily basis and helping people with their own experience. And I still feel like a freshman. So that's one thing that's great about astrology, is you will never get bored and you will never stop learning. And I'm a Sagittarius ascendant, so it's right in line with how I present myself to the world, which is the lifetime student. So
wonderful. Yeah. Now, Jennifer Hryciw, tell us your little story. How did you get into astrology? What inspired you? What was your journey like?
Like the Fox, actually, my grandmother, she always had all these crazy esoteric books in her attic. We weren't supposed to play in the attic, but I would go up there and she'd kind of be like, "What'd you find?" Like even though we were not supposed to go up there, she was always. And so I started pulling down all of her stuff, and she had a bunch of astrology books that I started reading. Started when I was really young, reading like Sydney Omar's, the year, the whole thing. And I would get those books and I'd pour through them as if they were this sacred text. I always wanted to, I have a Gemini rising, a Virgo sun. I love patterns, and I wanted to understand people. When I was in college, it was kind of a parlor trick, and I would to ask people their dates and start telling them things about themselves. Now, of course, at that point, we didn't have the internet. So, well, we did. We had barely the internet. So I just had charts though in the back of books, right? So they were just like, it was really tough. But at the same time, when like, oh, here's this placement and here's this placement between two planets, and I would just start telling them about themselves in a really snarky way. And then their friends would start giggling like, "Oh my God." And I would know these people, and I never really thought much about it. I went on to be, kind of a normal corporate person, but I just kept finding myself, talking with people, and everyone always would come to me with their problems and say like, "Oh, this and this and that and that." And I said, well, and I've of course been taking note of everybody's birthday and associating them with certain things. And I would say, well, this person needs this, for them to feel appreciated. And this person's always going to, and so I would start, helping relationships at work by understanding astrology. And people would always just kind of be like, oh, when I started thinking about doing it as a job, someone had asked me to do their chart. They were working on starting their own new business. And I said, this is, of course you're feeling this way. This is a perfect time for you to do it. Certain things were moving through their 9th, 10th house. It was just like all the top of, it's like, this is the time for you to go and to expand as much as you can and to start telling people what you're going to be known for. And then it's easy when you know somebody for them to think, oh, well, they're just being encouraging. So he sent me his friend's birth information and said, hey, can you just do this? And I sight unseen, don't know if it was a woman or a man, whatever. And I just, from the chart, put it out there. And then I recognized, I was like, oh, I can do this. That really gave me confidence, because I didn't really think, I always thought like, well, I know enough about their vibe and I'm an intuitive person. Like maybe I'm just reading into this. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, I'm going to start just doing charts. And now I've done so many charts of people that I don't know. Yeah. And it's incredible what you can tell. Like Fox said, it's incredible what you can tell from just these placements and these relationships between energies. And of course, using those cycles to help me and myself. I can't imagine not checking things. And I'm so, yeah, now I can do it every day. I have that space and privilege to look at the energies every day, and it helps me.
I don't have a very similar experience. I was brought into a Catholic family, and while my grandmother was, she had her own Catholic superstitions, astrology was not at all a part of our gig. But I became very curious about it in high school. I was always drawn to occultish things, like, religion as it was being handed to me. I always thought the Catholic Church was just very beautiful, but it didn't jive with me. I love Jesus, but all that other stuff, I'm like, nah. So occult things were always very fascinating to me. Part of that is astrology. So my astrological knowledge was kind of secondary. Like I knew the signs and I knew the archetypes associated with the signs, or the archetypes associated with the planets as they relate to other things that I study. And it wasn't until I had the first reading with the Fox, like, I don't know, like 4 years, like 3-4 years ago. It's been a while. It was when you first started up your business. And I was like, holy moly, like that's not my horoscope. That is a whole world of things. And it filled in a lot of gaps for me because, I've known forever that I'm a Pisces. I can't remember not knowing that. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely elements of it that I have always related to, but then there's parts of it that I'm like, that's not me. And then when, you start drawing in all of these other things, it's like, oh, that's why I don't relate to that, or that's why I relate more to this. Earlier this pandemic, as some people say, I started taking classes with Jennifer Hryciw in her astrologic lab. And, suddenly all of this started to open up and click together and make sense. And my husband then says, well, why are you doing this? Like, what do you get out of it? And at first I was like, what do you, take your judgments elsewhere. What do you mean? Because what my filters heard, why are you buying into this bullshit? And I was like, oh. And then when I came down off of that, I was like, oh, he like legitimately means, what do I get out of this? Because, it's not about the validity of the subject, right? Like, I can be an atheist and study theology, or I could be a evangelical and never open a book, like, and never give a thought to it. So it's like separate from the legitimacy, separate from my belief in it, that it's possible to get benefit from this. And for me, it's really just being able to layer on the archetypes into different parts of my life just for a frame of reference. Because oftentimes I find, when you're dealing with emotional issues or psychological issues or relationship issues, if you're starting from scratch, it might feel overwhelming and consuming. But if you layer something on it, it gives you a perspective. Like, okay, well, if I look at it from this point of view, what can I add or subtract to make a difference? And also, all of the things that you guys said, I totally relate to.
In regards to the Catholic Church, I wanted to respond to that because, yes, there's a lot of beauty in all religions, but every pope, every Holy Roman Emperor had an astrologer on payroll.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I've always been so fascinated by Henry VIII is because he changed a lot when he vacated the Catholic Church. So, and some of that was being, I won't say anything about somebody who's in power right now, but it was kind of like he didn't want anybody to be smarter than him or know anything that he didn't know, right? Because he wanted to be above the Pope. That was kind of like the beginning of astrology, like taking a hit. And even though his daughter Elizabeth had John Dee, who's a famous astrologer, fascinating person, he was one of her main advisors. JP Morgan is famously quoted as saying, a millionaire has a good accountant, a billionaire has an astrologer.
Love that.
So Nancy Reagan famously had an astrologer. I mean, that is not a secret. There are people in very high positions that utilize an astrologer. When people are making decisions and they're so perfectly timed, that is the use of sacred geometry, which is really what the chart is about. Because when you are born, you're born at a specific time, you're born in a specific location on a specific date for a reason. Because those frequencies that you come in on are the basis, that's the map, that's the handbook of your life. You have free will, so all those frequencies are changing all the time. And so as those things come across your frequency, then it gives you options and choices. And so from the standpoint of really understanding the power of astrology, I'm not a predictive astrologer. I'm a person who helps you understand where you're at now and what your options are, because ultimately, you are the captain of your ship. And if you don't, how do they navigate on a ship? They use the stars. So if you don't understand how to read the stars, then who's navigating your ship? Everything else is navigating your ship. And I just think it gives you an opportunity to take the helm and be the captain of your life. I mean, it truly is a strategy. It gives you strategy and the opportunity to make strategic choices.
That whole, everything you just said lights me up so much. Number one, I've had this recent thought, and it's in some ways it terrifies me to think that, perhaps evil people have astrologers in their pockets, which now I'm like, oh shit, because, it's hidden now, right? It's not necessarily so famous to say like, oh yeah, and then I have this astrologer. I know that when we look at the cycles, there are no, it's not as if it's fated. And again, like I don't do predictive astrology either, but I do look at what energies are at play and say, well, this is a possibility and this is a possibility. If you want to work with those energies, you're going to go faster, further, right? And those are the things that if you know that, it can be it's so powerful, and it helps to understand what you're calling in. And again, when you said, these energies in a specific time and in a specific way, when you have this ripe soil, it's perfect for what can grow there. This is what comes through. And that's how I believe, astrology kind of marks that time. It snapshots and it pulls you in through this portal you know, at this specific time, because it's ripe with your potentiality. As we constellate and everything transits through our life, and all these things kind of keep happening, all these patterns keep happening, we have the opportunity to respond. And knowing what is at play, noticing all the cycles of each planet, the cycles of the nodes, you know, knowing that these things are working us. Like, once you start looking at those patterns, you're like, oh, well, yeah, okay. Now I know a different language for a hormonal growth cycle, you know, a midlife crisis, you know, a maturity cycle that, you know, kind of requires me to stand in my power, right? There's all sorts of things that astrology can help you understand and own. You know, astrology can be so empowering that way, right? I think that's what we all feel.
I really feel like it's having a garment for your life. Right. So it's like, or like having your maps on your Google Maps on your phone, something that's telling you where to go. If you just go on a cross country trip and you just go out with no navigation, then, you know, how long is it going to take? You don't know. You can't calculate anything. It's really the metaphysical mathematics of the universe. And it really helps you calculate a lot of things. And the cyclical part of it, when you start to understand the cycles, then, you know, one of the things I love about the cycles is it helps me understand other people, particularly in my life. And when I see somebody who's going through something, it really helps me better respond to them and better support them through that, because I think, gosh, you know, they're going through a nodal reverse. And so, you know, they're going to be feeling like the rug's been pulled out from under them. They're going to need some extra support. You're going to need some extra understanding, some extra love. So it can really not just help you, but it can help you, you know, navigate the relationships you have with other people. And ultimately, the people in your life that you encounter are part of your soul group. And you're here to, you know, be helping them with their energies too. And so to be able to do that in a conscious manner makes you a better, you know, wife, husband, friend, sister, brother, cousin, whatever it is.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you guys were both talking is that something I get out of astrology is the sense of connection to everything. Like, I think of, you know, people are like, do you really believe in astrology? I'm like, well, do I believe in astrology? I believe in quantum physics. So I know that at subatomic level, me and Saturn are connected. There's no distance or space between us. So where it was when I was born and what was going on with it when I was born, that makes sense to me, that would impact me. You know, it gives me a sense of connection to everything. And that includes the people in my life. And you're right, knowing what other people are going through increases my ability to be empathetic with them. And I think that, you know, that's something that we as a whole can definitely work on.
We can use that.
We can use a lot of it.
I think too, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I think one of the things that I do have kids in my life, and I think one of the things is when you see what cycle they're experiencing, you're like, gosh, do I step in here? Do I open my mouth and tell them, or do I let them go through the experience, because this is part of their journey? Everybody, these are all cycles we all go through, and sometimes it's like puberty. You can't just skip puberty. You have to go through it. Nobody ever wants to go through puberty, but there are some things that happen to you during that period of time that absolutely change you for the next cycle. And so so it also helps you in that regard. So,
you know, it's funny. I'm sorry. I'm just going to, as far as kids go, my son, Ian, had just had his birthday yesterday. So he turned 12, and his Jupiter return, he just had a Jupiter return, like it was like a week ago. And I asked him, I was like, so do you feel any different today? And he's like, what? I was like, well, you're having a Jupiter return. He's just like, what? I'm going to have a Jupiter return too here on Christmas Day. You know, I have 3 kids, and I have a great relationship with all of my kids. They're all very different relationships, but Ian and I have maybe it's that Jupiter that we're synced up on our Jupiter cycle that makes us so that we can kind of relate to each other differently. So, you know, and even just recognizing that is like, oh, that's.
And knowing where you're synced up with people, it's like,
really important.
I think that's such a beautiful way to, you know, utilize astrology, because once you know where you're synced up, it can help with that intimate connection. And of course, then where you need space or say, well, we have a hard time, we can know that we're going to hit that square or that corner or whatever. And there is going to be more of a challenge in the way that we relate to each other in this way. And knowing that about your kids is very helpful to take that into account when you're speaking to anyone, you know, I think is so helpful. It's like, oh yeah, this is what they, you know, they need. And not that I can give that to them or I'm going to change who I am particularly, right? And sometimes that's not possible, but it's such a good knowing to say like, oh, you're going through this thing, and you can see it coming. Like I have some in-laws that are approaching their Saturn returns, and I'm watching all of these things start to kind of shuffle into place, and it's like, ooh, you know, something's getting there, right? To Foxy's point, like I'm still learning so much. I mean, thank goodness I don't think it ever ends, because I don't want to stop learning. I keep going down different rabbit holes.
I'm always buying more books and taking more workshops online. And it's really, you know, I see a lot of groups pop up online and Facebook and stuff. And you see just some of the absolute trash that people like read somewhere and then they think it's rote. It's like, no, you know, astrology requires study. Astrology requires humility, because you will be its bitch, and there's so much to learn, and it's like,
so
you know, it's overwhelming sometimes. And I think there's so much available, but I would highly recommend, you know, starting to actually look at your chart on a daily basis, start you know, taking a look at the transits, you know, start looking at solar arcs. I mean, all of those things are relatively explained on these applications that are pretty inexpensive. I mean, you can get an app on your phone for 99 cents. You know,
well, now, and you guys both host learning communities. The Fox has her den right now, which is going to be transformed into something else, and we're so excited to hear about it. But you are, you know, kind of a teacher, and then Jennifer Hryciw, she's got her Astrologic lab. And so you guys, you know, for the viewer, who go follow them on Instagram, because they're very different people. They have very different approaches.
I love reading your stuff, Fox, because I'm like,
I love reading yours.
Yeah.
You guys have like different flavors. I mean, it's the same food, different flavors kind of things.
I think it's really important, though, that people understand that you can't join a Facebook group, have all this knowledge dropped on you, and understand how to apply it. There's so much more to astrology. And I see these people out there and they're like, you know, well, I've got this at this degree, and, you know, this is rote. It's not rote. It could be in a different house for somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you got all these different aspects. It's so complex. If astrology was easy, everybody would do it.
You know, I have found, especially during this pandemic, and I think, you know, I'll be 48 in February. And I just am going to be starting a new Jupiter cycle at the end of December. I'm getting close to my Chiron return. And so this year has really been about doing the work. I'd say I really started doing the work. I found a really funny video about the work by Jordan Firstman. Do you guys follow him? Amazing. It's this impression of somebody doing the work. I'll have to repost it on Instagram. But you know, having astrology in my life right now has given me a real framework to compartmentalize parts of my life, realizing you can't actually compartmentalize your life. It's complex. But sometimes when you're trying to analyze it, or when you're trying to get to the root of things, to be able to just take a section of life and look at it, like, it has been beneficial to me. You know, we're stuck at home. What else am I going to do? I'm going to grow personally. And I've definitely used astrology as a way to do that.
One thing I wanted to add to that is you just got through your Pluto square Pluto, which is a huge marker. A lot of people think of that as the midlife crisis, when in fact, your midlife crisis is really supposed to be Chiron. But it can
it's all happening together, right? It's so interesting. It's like, let's
kick your ass, and then we'll like put some fire on it, right?
Yeah, and then Saturn comes up and cleans it up. You know?
Yeah, but at the same time, Corey, the fact that this is like this has been like a journey for you. I think that is indicative of going into a Pluto square Pluto, and then also the fact that you've learned so much, and you know, you're going through all of this, but everybody else is going through this in different ways. And I know you personally, so I've seen you managing some really challenging stuff very beautifully and very eloquently and very maturely. And I think that that is a testament to the fact that you're like, wow, this might be something I can use as a tool to help me. And I think you've shown how that's really, I mean, you're doing wonderful, beautiful things in your life, and I'm so proud of you. So
Oh, Fox. Thanks. Yeah,
I've known you a long time.
I know. I was saying our relationship has completed a metatonic cycle because like 18 and a half years we've known each other. So
Oh, I love that.
and it really, like, if I am to think about who I was 18 and a half years ago, it's like I've lived several lives in that span. And then here we are to see kind of the fruition of
But
what
you're
started.
you're still the beautiful, fun, life-affirming person that I fell in love with 18 and a half
Oh,
years ago. I mean, I think to myself, where, you know, how we, even though we live on different coasts, and how we've, you know, we just pick up where we left off.
yeah.
And I think that that's important. And I absolutely know, I haven't done a synastry chart for us, but I should.
I was just thinking, I was like, oh my goodness.
Because I mean, I absolutely know you're in my soul group, and I think that's important too. Is, you know, when you meet somebody and you automatically have a connection with them, there's a reason for that. That's your frequency being
Yeah.
activated, so that you realize this person is here to share with you, to teach you, to support you, to help you, even if it may not feel fun. But and that's also a great way to maybe look at some things in your life where maybe somebody is, you might consider them an enemy. But if
Right.
you
They're
consider
just a
them,
lesson in disguise.
yes, they're a teacher. They're a teacher for you.
Well, it's interesting because I think Jennifer Hryciw is part of the soul group too, because it's like
Yeah.
we literally, I mean, the cosmos came into line. Like
I know, I don't know how it happened, right? That
we literally met like 5 minutes before this pandemic started.
Yeah,
It was the last possible chance.
countdown to pandemic.
Yeah, it was the last possible chance. And considering how often I go out and do things, you know, my friend Katrina was like, "Oh, my friend from high school is doing this thing and for inbox."
Yeah, I went to high school.
That's how we know. Yeah, that's how we know each other.
Yeah.
It's funny because also I met Jennifer before you met Jennifer, and then you told me
did.
you were doing.
I didn't know that
Jennifer,
you knew each other. Like,
I know her.
There's constellating.
And it's so funny because I lived in Seattle so long ago now, but I have so many clients from the Northwest, and I would say more clients from the Northwest than I do from where I live. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think you have a Northwest vibe. Like, like you just vibe with the people.
If you look at my astrocartography, that's absolutely true.
I was just thinking of that. I was like, I think we had that conversation because we had a conversation on my podcast together, and at one point you were talking about your moves and how it related to some of that stuff, and it's just we had a question about that in the lab, and I went down the rabbit hole of astrocartography.
It's so fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And again, like, there's so many different kinds of astrology and so many different ways to use it. And it always meets, it's just like your heart chakra, like everything meets here in our bubble, right? And so, you know, just like I experience certain things in a certain way because of my chart, or I can say because of my chart, right? And so I really think people, when they feel into, you know, their own relationships, like if you guys were to look at your synastry chart together, knowing what you know together, and just be like, it could probably just be, it's like all these heart explosions, right? Because you recognize it's like frequency, it's like these rings come together and it goes, you know, it just has this like, this moment where, or even like deciding we were supposed to have this meeting yesterday. What's the different astrology from yesterday at this time?
Right.
Like, for whatever reason, today was more aligned. And, you know, I'll just, you know.
I like the numerology of today too, the 1122. Like, I like it all. It's all
I like it. Oh yeah, 11/22/2020.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to say before we wrap things up?
Well, I'll say one thing. If anybody is curious about astrology, the thing that I would recommend is that you seek out an astrologer that is professional. There are many different astrologers. They charge different prices, so shop around. It's no different than healthcare. You will know when you jive with somebody. Ask them if you can talk to them for a few minutes or get to know them. I mean, I would never refuse somebody that if they needed to. I think experiencing it is really what will, help you believe it. Once you really start to see how it works, then you can start to branch out, start, maybe pulling an app, look at your chart on a daily basis, start to recognize some patterns, look to groups, find out what books are good to read or to listen to on Audible. There's lots of things out there. Astrology is a journey. It's like collecting Tupperware. Once you buy one piece, you have to keep going back to the get more, it's not, it's a lifelong experience. So, but it will absolutely help you with the world that we're moving into. And the world we're moving into is going to be extremely different than the world we're coming out of right now.
What about you, Jennifer? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I just feel like that is the mic drop of it. It's like there's so many things that are different about now. And this year has proven what's even possible to dismantle. If you're looking to work with astrology and to kind of tune in, I think, it is easy to start with where the sun goes. I think looking at your own chart and noticing the moon and the sun, I think is a really good way to kind of break it down to basics, because the sun moves through the whole wheel in a year, but the moon does it in a month. So if you want to feel into Scorpio, you can feel it into, there's 2 days a month or so where the moon is there. I mean, it is really like tuning a radio station. Astrology is the most extensive psychological map we have. The study of psychology and the study of what it is that people are capable of or going through, or life stages and cycles, all this stuff. Astrology has it all. And it's been studied for so much longer than modern day psychology that I think there's so much to integrate here. And learning about, all the different ways that these energies go together is such a joy. Like, right? Like it's like, ooh, and when you think about that energy kind of, and how it can help us deal with, right, what we're going through right now. Because there is beauty in all the things, right? There's beauty in that, all the Capricorn stuff, and how we've been kind of isolated this year and insulated with all this that's going on. We've had to really look at what's necessary, how much of it is wasteful. It's very Capricorn of us to like decide, well, we're going to edit. Okay. We got this big fat red pen right now and we need to edit out. And as we step into this new, we're going to be offered a lot of new ways of communicating and new language and new technologies and new ways to show up. And yeah, I think astrology is trying to help us understand how to make those critical cuts.
Yeah, I think the application is like the key there, because I know when I started taking the astrological lab, my commitment to myself was that I was going to learn my chart through the filter of loving it. Like loving even the shitty parts of it. Like this opposition here, not a huge fan. I got this yod, not a huge fan of that particular, but I love it because it's me, it's the becoming of me, it's a gift, even the things that are hard. So, it is really like, astrology is a tool. How you use it and how you choose to use it is like how it manifests.
A love frequency can change any aspect and how you approach any aspect. So you may be going through a difficult passage, but if you approach it with love and an open heart and the willingness to be flexible and make changes and not be defeated by it, it's amazing how you can just completely change the entire frequency and the path of your life.
Your chart is what it is. And there's zero things about it that are set in stone. It is just a framework, and how you apply it and how it shows up in your life is how you let it show up in your life. You know what I mean?
Some things don't express themselves because you don't pay attention, right? Like once
Yes.
you notice, like I think it's funny when people recognize like, oh, I've got a moon sign and a rising sign and something's in Saturn and I'm everything. You start to feel it's like, oh, okay, I can show up in different ways, and that's, helpful.
So I think that we have shown the difference between the Cosmo horoscopes and what is actually available through having your astrological chart read by an experienced astrologer. There's so much to it, and there's so many positive ways to apply it to your life. And so I'm saying you should check it out. You should go follow these lovely ladies on Instagram. It'll definitely give you a feel for how they show up, how they communicate, what's their flavor. And then, you should definitely pick one of them, pick both of them. I would actually pick both of them because they are different readers. They bring different things to the table, and both things, make more.
Yeah. So. Yeah, by the way, it's like anytime you get a reading, you're going to have a different, anytime I read for somebody, if I look at your chart, Jennifer, Fox, and I looked at it, I don't know, a year ago almost, it's going to be a different reading, right? Because it's always shifting. So it's,
and I'm changing and you're changing.
Yeah.
Everything's changing. And that's why I say it's important to get a sense for the person that's going to read your chart, because
for sure.
That connection opens up, other frequencies. When you have two frequencies meet, you get harmony, hopefully. And
it's like picking a good therapist. You need your therapist to be somebody that you jive with, and
someone that speaks your language and
you have freedom with, and then feel a connection to. So, all right. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for this experience. It was a great conversation. I love you ladies so much. And to everybody watching, check them out. And I hope that you got something out of this. If you have any questions or comments, you can hit either one of these ladies up, or you can put them in the comments below, or you can message me or whatever. So in the meanwhile, I want you to take good care of yourselves, take good care of your astrological chart, and take good care of your plants.